You're fired. Effective immediately. Margaret Chen's voice echoes through the nursing home's rehabilitation department, loud enough for staff, patients, and visiting families to hear. Pack your things and get out of this facility before I call security. 43-year-old Terrence stands in the doorway of the therapy gym, still wearing his physical therapy uniform, staring at his administrator with complete shock. Around them, elderly patients pause mid-exercise. Other therapists freeze. Family members visiting their loved ones turn to watch. Miss Chen, I was just trying to... Terrence keeps his voice calm despite his racing heart. Trying to what? Terrify families with insane conspiracy theories? Tell grieving relatives their loved ones were murdered? Margaret's face is red with fury as she stalks toward him. Mrs. Patterson's daughter is in my office right now, hysterical because you told her mother's death was suspicious. The woman had a heart attack. She was 87 years old. That's not suspicious. That's life. The hallway goes quiet. Everyone is watching now. Nurses stop mid-rounds. Visitors stare. Another therapist backs away from the confrontation. Ms. Chen, I have concerns about a pattern. 5 patients in 3 months, all sudden deaths, all with similar symptoms before 5 elderly people in a nursing home died? Margaret cuts him off with a harsh laugh. That's called reality. People come here to live their final years. They die. That's what happens in nursing homes. The fact that you think that's suspicious shows you have no business working in geriatric care. Terrence feels the familiar weight of being dismissed, of having legitimate concerns treated as paranoia, of being made to look foolish in front of colleagues and families. Ms. Chen, please, just look at the medical records. The symptoms don't match their diagnoses. Mrs. Patterson had controlled heart disease. Her sudden cardiac arrest doesn't fit her profile. Same with Mr. Rodriguez, Mrs. Kim, all of them. Something's wrong. The only thing wrong is you. Margaret pulls out her phone. Security. I need someone to escort Terrence Williams out of the building immediately. He's terminated for cause, making false medical allegations, upsetting families, creating liability for this facility. Terrence looks at the patients watching this confrontation. Vulnerable, elderly people who trust the staff to keep them safe. And 5 of them had died under circumstances that didn't add up. Ms. Chen, I really think these deaths need to be investigated. I don't care what you think. You're a physical therapist, not a doctor. You're certainly not a detective. Your job is to help patients with mobility, not play medical examiner and make wild accusations. But what Margaret Chen doesn't know about the physical therapist she's about to have removed by security is that Terrence has a PhD in toxicology and spent 12 years working as a forensic chemist analyzing suspicious deaths. The wild accusations she's dismissing are based on textbook symptoms of poisoning that Terrence has seen in dozens of cases. And the heart attacks and natural deaths she's defending, those are actually murders. A nurse is systematically poisoning patients to steal their estates, and the pattern Terrence identified will eventually reveal 12 victims over 3 years. The toxicologist who helps elderly patients walk again is about to prove that expertise doesn't disappear when you change careers. And the evidence he's been quietly documenting is about to expose a serial killer operating inside a facility that's supposed to protect its most vulnerable residents. And Margaret Chen's public firing? That's about to become evidence of obstruction in a murder investigation that will destroy the nursing home's reputation and send multiple people to prison for life. Sunrise Hills Nursing and Rehabilitation Center is a 180-bed facility serving elderly residents who need either full-time care or post-hospital rehabilitation. Built in 1992, renovated twice, it sits in a quiet suburban area surrounded by trees and well-maintained grounds. The kind of place families feel good about when they can no longer care for aging parents at home. The facility has 3 wings: skilled nursing for residents needing constant medical care, rehabilitation for patients recovering from surgery or illness, and memory care for dementia patients. Staff of 120 includes nurses, therapists, aides, dietary workers, maintenance, administration. Annual cost ranges from $6,000 to $9,000 per month, depending on level of care. Most residents are there for years, some until they die, which happens regularly. This is a nursing home, Death is part of the reality, but some deaths aren't natural. And Terrence has been noticing the pattern for 3 months. 43-year-old Terrence Williams works as a physical therapist in the rehabilitation wing, has been at Sunrise Hills for 18 months, gets patients moving after strokes, surgeries, injuries, helps them regain strength and mobility, makes $68,000 a year, decent salary, but nothing like what he used to make. Because Terrence's current career as a physical therapist is his second life. His first life was as Dr. Terrence Williams, Ph.D. in toxicology, forensic chemist for the county medical examiner's office. He'd spent 12 years analyzing suspicious deaths. When someone died under questionable circumstances, Terrence was the one who tested tissue samples, blood, organs, looking for poisons, drugs, toxins, determining if deaths were natural, accidental, suicide, or murder. He was brilliant at it. Had encyclopedic knowledge of how different substances killed people, could identify obscure poisons from subtle chemical markers, could tell the difference between a heart attack and digitalis poisoning, between kidney failure and antifreeze ingestion, between natural death and murder disguised as natural causes. His testimony had led to 43 murder convictions. His analysis had exonerated 12 people wrongly accused. His work mattered, gave families answers, gave justice to victims. Then came the case that destroyed everything. 4 years ago, a prominent judge died suddenly, ruled natural causes, heart attack at age 72, but the family was suspicious, insisted on full toxicology. Terrence found lethal levels of digoxin in the tissue samples. Not the therapeutic levels the judge was prescribed for his heart condition, lethal overdose levels. Someone had poisoned him. The police investigated, arrested the judge's much younger wife. She'd been having an affair, stood to inherit $4 million, had access to his medications. Strong case. Except the defense hired expert witnesses who claimed Terrence's analysis was wrong. That post-mortem redistribution of digoxin could create false readings, that the judge had taken too much medication accidentally, that Terrence was seeing murder where there was only an elderly man's tragic mistake. The defense experts had credentials, published researchers, professors at major universities. Their testimony was persuasive even though it was wrong. The jury acquitted. The judge's wife walked free, and Terrence's professional reputation took a massive hit. The defense made him look incompetent, made it seem like he'd sent an innocent woman to trial based on faulty science. Media ran stories questioning his previous cases. Did forensic chemists' errors lead to wrongful convictions? The medical examiner's office launched an internal review of all Terrence's cases, spent 8 months scrutinizing every analysis he'd ever done. They found nothing wrong, because there was nothing wrong. Terrence's work had been impeccable. His analysis of the judge's poisoning had been correct. The defense experts had been lying for money, but the damage was done. The county commissioners, several of whom had been friends with the judge's wife, questioned whether they could continue employing a forensic chemist whose testimony had been discredited in court. The medical examiner fought for him, but the political pressure was intense. Budget cuts were coming. Terrence's position was restructured. He was laid off. At 39 years old, Dr. Terrence Williams, with a Ph.D. and 12 years of forensic experience, was unemployed. He tried to find similar work, applied to medical examiner offices in other counties, forensic labs, pharmaceutical companies, universities, anywhere that valued toxicology expertise. Every interview came back to the same question. Can you address the controversy around the judge's case? Terrence would explain. The defense experts had been wrong. His analysis had been correct. The woman had murdered her husband and gotten away with it because she could afford to pay experts to lie. But employers heard controversial testimony and acquittal and moved on to other candidates. Nobody wanted the liability. After 2 years of rejections and watching his savings evaporate, Terrence made a drastic decision. Career change. Start over in a different field that could still use his science background. He'd always been interested in helping people directly. Decided to pursue physical therapy. Took accelerated courses. His PhD and science background let him test out of prerequisites. Got his PT license in 18 months. Applied for positions. His PhD actually worked against him. Employers worried he was overqualified and would leave. But Sunrise Hills needed therapists badly and didn't ask too many questions. At 41 years old, Dr. Terrence Williams, PhD in toxicology, former forensic chemist, started working as a physical therapist at a nursing home for $68,000 a year. It was humiliating. He'd gone from analyzing murders to helping elderly people practice walking with walkers, from testifying in criminal trials to filling out insurance paperwork for Medicare, from cutting-edge forensic science to basic rehabilitation exercises. But he needed the job, needed the income, needed to rebuild his career and reputation. And he was good at physical therapy, genuinely good. His science background helped him understand biomechanics and physiology. His patience from years of meticulous lab work translated well to working with elderly patients who needed encouragement. He'd been at Sunrise Hills for 18 months, had settled into the routine, was making peace with his career change. Then 3 months ago, Mrs. Eleanor Kim died suddenly. Terrence had been working with her for 6 weeks. She was recovering from hip replacement surgery, making excellent progress. Strong woman, mentally sharp, good attitude. At 81, she was healthier than many patients 20 years younger. Then one morning she was found dead in her room, ruled a heart attack. Terrence had been surprised. Mrs. Kim had no history of heart disease. Her cardiac workup before surgery had been normal. She'd shown no symptoms of cardiac problems during their therapy sessions, but she was 81. Hearts can fail without warning at that age. Terrence had noted his surprise but thought nothing more of it. Then 3 weeks later, Mr. Roberto Rodriguez died. 85 years old, stroke recovery, had been doing well in therapy, suddenly collapsed and died, ruled cardiac arrest. Mr. Rodriguez had controlled hypertension and mild heart disease, but his condition had been stable. Terrence had seen his medical chart. His cardiologist had cleared him for aggressive rehabilitation. 2 sudden cardiac deaths in patients who'd been stable. Unusual, but still possibly coincidence. Then Mrs. Janet Patterson died 2 weeks ago. 87 years old, recovering from pneumonia, had been improving steadily. Terrence had seen her the day before. She'd walked 50 feet with her walker, longest distance yet, was excited about going home soon. Found dead the next morning. Heart attack. 3 patients. 3 sudden cardiac deaths. All had been in rehabilitation, all improving, all had died unexpectedly. Terrence's forensic training kicked in. 3 similar deaths in 3 months in a 60-bed rehabilitation wing. That wasn't normal variation. That was a pattern. He started looking at records more carefully, pulled files on recent deaths in the rehabilitation wing over the past year. Found 2 more. Mr. James Morrison died 7 months ago. Mrs. Linda Chen died 5 months ago. Both sudden cardiac arrests. Both had been in rehabilitation, making good progress. 5 deaths in 8 months, all similar circumstances, all cardiac-related. Terrence knew from his forensic work. When you see a cluster of similar deaths in a specific population, you investigate for common causes, environmental factors, medication errors, or intentional harm. He started looking at what the 5 patients had in common. All were in the rehabilitation wing. All were relatively healthy for their ages. No terminal illnesses, just recovering from treatable conditions. All had families and estates. These weren't destitute elderly people with no one to inherit their belongings. And all had died of sudden cardiac arrest, despite having no significant cardiac risk factors. Terrence's toxicology brain knew dozens of substances that could cause cardiac arrest that looked natural. Potassium chloride injected IV, causes heart to stop, leaves no trace. Digoxin overdose, mimics heart attack, easily missed. Insulin overdose in non-diabetics causes seizures and cardiac arrest that looks like natural causes. But he had no proof, just a pattern and suspicion. Couldn't exactly demand toxicology screens on elderly people who'd already been buried. So Terrence started watching more carefully, documenting, noting which staff members were on duty when patients died, looking for patterns. He noticed something. All 5 deaths had occurred on night shifts, and the same nurse, Cheryl Anderson, had been on duty for 4 of the 5 deaths. That could be coincidence. Cheryl was a senior nurse who often worked nights. She'd probably been on duty for lots of patients who didn't die, too. But Terrence's instincts told him to keep watching. 2 weeks ago, he'd started noticing Cheryl's behavior around certain patients. She'd spend extra time with the ones who had money, who talked about their families and estates. She'd ask questions about wills and inheritances. Do you have children? Do they visit? What will they do with your house when you're gone? The questions seemed friendly, just a nurse making conversation with lonely elderly patients. But Terrence heard something else. Cheryl was identifying targets. Then Terrence noticed something in Mrs. Patterson's chart the day before she died. Cheryl had administered Mrs. Patterson's evening medications, documented in the nursing notes. But the medications listed didn't match Mrs. Patterson's prescriptions exactly. There was an extra entry, PRN, medication for anxiety, that Terrence hadn't seen before. He'd checked with the pharmacy. No anti-anxiety medication was prescribed for Mrs. Patterson, no PRN order in her chart. So what had Cheryl given her? The next day, Mrs. Patterson was dead. Heart attack. Body removed quickly. Family called. No autopsy. Why would there be? 87-year-old woman with heart disease history died of heart attack. Completely normal. Except Mrs. Patterson's heart disease had been mild and controlled, and Cheryl had given her an undocumented medication the night before she died. Terrence had gone to his supervisor, the head of the rehabilitation department, and explained his concerns. I think we need to look at recent deaths. There's a pattern that worries me. His supervisor had been dismissive. Terrence, people die here. That's the reality of geriatric care. You can't investigate every death like it's suspicious. I'm not suggesting every death is suspicious. Just these 5. They all fit a pattern. You're a physical therapist, not a doctor, not an investigator. Focus on your patients who are alive, not the ones who've passed. Terrence had tried explaining his background. I have a PhD in toxicology. I worked as a forensic chemist for 12 years. I know what suspicious death patterns look like. That's not your job anymore. Your job is physical therapy. Stay in your lane. So Terrence had gone to Margaret Chen, the facility administrator, explained his concerns. The pattern of deaths, the inconsistencies in the medical records, the suspicious behavior. Margaret had reacted exactly as she was reacting now, with fury and dismissal. You're going to upset families. You're going to create liability. You're making accusations based on paranoia, not evidence. I have evidence. The medical records show elderly people died of heart attacks, because that's what elderly people die of. Your evidence is you overstepping your role and playing detective when you should be doing your actual job. She'd warned him then. Drop this immediately. Don't mention it to families. Don't discuss it with staff. Don't create problems where none exist. But Terrence couldn't drop it, because he was certain people were being murdered. So he'd made the mistake of approaching Mrs. Patterson's daughter yesterday, pulled her aside after a therapy session. I'm so sorry for your loss. I had some concerns about your mother's death. Have you considered requesting an autopsy? Just to be certain. The daughter had been horrified. What? Why? What are you saying? I'm saying there have been several sudden deaths here recently, and the pattern concerns me. Your mother was doing very well. Her sudden cardiac arrest doesn't fit. Are you telling me my mother was murdered? At this nursing home? I'm saying I think her death should be investigated. That's all. The daughter had gone straight to Margaret Chen, hysterical, terrified, demanding answers. And Margaret had responded by firing Terrence publicly, making an example of him, showing all staff and families that this kind of paranoia wouldn't be tolerated. Now Terrence stands in the hallway while security approaches. Patients and families watch. His professional reputation is being destroyed for the second time in 4 years. But this time, he's certain he's right. And he's not going to let politics or institutional protection silence him when people are being murdered. Ms. Chen, Terrence says loudly, clearly, in the voice he used to use when presenting forensic findings in court. I have a PhD in toxicology and 12 years of experience as a forensic chemist. I've investigated hundreds of suspicious deaths. And I'm telling you that 5 patients at this facility have been murdered. The symptoms are consistent with poisoning. The pattern is undeniable. And you're firing me to cover it up because you're more worried about liability than patient safety. The hallway goes completely silent. Margaret stares at him, face draining of color. What? What did you just say? I said these deaths are murders, not natural causes. Someone is poisoning patients. I've been documenting evidence for 3 months. And you firing me right now is going to look like obstruction when this investigation becomes public. Staff members are pulling out phones. Family members look horrified. Other patients in wheelchairs look terrified. Margaret tries to recover. You're insane. This is slander. You're making insane accusations with no evidence. Security, remove him now. I have evidence. Terrence pulls out his phone. Medical records showing inconsistencies. Documentation of which nurse was on duty for suspicious deaths. Photographs of medication discrepancies. Detailed notes on symptoms that match poisoning profiles. I've been gathering evidence the way I was trained to. Methodically, carefully, thoroughly. You photographed confidential medical records? That's illegal. That's a HIPAA violation. It's whistleblower protection. I'm documenting crimes occurring at this facility. That's protected activity. Terrence looks at the families and staff watching. Everyone here needs to know. If your family member died suddenly at this facility in the past year, you should request an autopsy and full toxicology screen. Because at least 5 people have been poisoned, and there may be more. Margaret's face goes from pale to purple. You've just committed slander. I'm suing you personally. I'm having you arrested. You can try, but I'm about to contact the medical examiner's office, the police, and the state health department. They'll investigate. They'll exhume bodies. They'll find exactly what I'm telling you, evidence of poisoning. And you firing me right now will be documented as retaliation against a whistleblower. Terrence turns to Mrs. Patterson's daughter, who's standing in Margaret's office doorway looking shocked. Ma'am, I'm truly sorry for your loss. I know this is painful to hear, but I believe your mother was murdered. Please request an autopsy, full toxicology panel. Look for cardiac glycosides, potassium, insulin. The evidence will be there. The daughter starts crying. Oh my God! Oh my God! Margaret grabs her phone. I'm calling our lawyers and the police. You're going to be arrested for harassment, slander, HIPAA violations. Call whoever you want. Terrence takes off his ID badge, sets it on the nurse's station counter. I'm done working here, but I'm not done investigating. And when the bodies are exhumed and the toxicology comes back positive, you're going to wish you'd listened to me instead of firing me. Security guards arrive, looking uncertain. Margaret points at Terrence. Remove him, immediately! Terrence doesn't resist, walks toward the exit calmly, but he addresses everyone in the hallway as he goes. If you have family members here, watch them carefully, ask questions, check their medications, request copies of all medical records. Don't trust that they're safe just because this is a licensed facility, because someone here is killing patients, and the administration would rather fire the person who noticed than investigate the murders. Margaret is screaming behind him, but Terrence keeps walking, out of the rehabilitation wing, through the main lobby, past the reception desk where visitors stare. He gets to his car in the parking lot. Security escorts him to make sure he leaves the property. Terrence sits in his car, takes deep breaths. He's unemployed again, fired again, reputation damaged again, being threatened with lawsuits and arrest. But he's certain people are being murdered, and he has enough evidence to force an investigation. He pulls out his phone, makes the call he swore he'd never make again. Dr. Patricia Morrison, his former boss at the medical examiner's office. They hadn't spoken since he was laid off 4 years ago. She answers on the second ring. Terrence, is that you? Dr. Morrison, I need to report multiple suspicious deaths. Nursing home. I believe patients are being poisoned. I have documentation suggesting at least 5 murders over 8 months. I need the medical examiner's office to investigate. Silence. Then, Terrence, you don't work here anymore. You can't just call and request investigations. I know. but I'm calling as a concerned citizen with forensic expertise who's identified a serial killer. 5 elderly patients dead under suspicious circumstances. All sudden cardiac arrests despite no significant heart disease. All in the same facility. Pattern consistent with poisoning. How do you know this? Because I've been working as a physical therapist at the nursing home. I've been treating these patients. I've reviewed their medical records. I know what poisoning looks like. I did this job for 12 years. And these deaths are not natural. Patricia is quiet for a long moment. Are you certain? As certain as I've ever been about a forensic finding. This is real. People are being murdered. I've been documenting everything. I need you to open an official investigation. Send me everything you have. I'll review it. If it's as serious as you're saying, I'll bring it to the chief medical examiner. Thank you. Terrence, you know this is going to open you up to legal action, right? If you're wrong, the nursing home will destroy you. I'm not wrong. And even if I was, I'd rather be destroyed for trying to stop murders than stay silent while people die. They hang up. Terrence spends the next hour in his car compiling everything. Photographs of medical records, timeline of deaths, analysis of symptoms, documentation of which staff were on duty, his professional assessment based on 12 years of forensic experience. He emails it all to Patricia, then starts making more calls. State Health Department, Adult Protective Services, local police. He reports to everyone, gives them the same information. Multiple suspicious deaths, pattern consistent with poisoning, need immediate investigation. Most of them are skeptical. Sir, elderly people die in nursing homes? That's not automatically suspicious. I'm a PhD toxicologist, former forensic chemist. I know the difference between natural death and poisoning. These are poisonings. That gets their attention. A former forensic chemist making allegations of murder has more credibility than a random caller. By the end of the day, Terrence has filed official complaints with 4 different agencies, all of them now legally obligated to investigate, and he waits. 3 days later, the investigation begins in earnest. The medical examiner's office contacts Sunrise Hills, requests medical records for all deaths in the past year. The nursing home's lawyers try to block it, but the ME has legal authority to investigate suspicious deaths. The state health department sends inspectors. They interview staff, review medication logs, check procedures. Adult Protective Services opens a case, interviews families of deceased patients, and the police get involved. Because if this is murder, it's a criminal investigation. Terrence is interviewed by all of them. He presents his evidence, walks them through his analysis, explains the patterns he noticed, shows the medical record inconsistencies. The lead police detective is skeptical at first. Mr. Williams, you're a physical therapist. Why should we believe you have expertise to identify poisoning? Because I'm not just a physical therapist. I'm Dr. Terrence Williams, PhD in toxicology. I worked for 12 years as a forensic chemist analyzing suspicious deaths. I've testified as an expert witness in 43 murder trials. Physical therapy is my second career. My first career was exactly this kind of investigation. The detective's skepticism evaporates. Why didn't you mention that from the beginning? I tried. The nursing home administration didn't want to hear it. They fired me for reporting the concerns. The detective makes notes. Okay, walk me through everything. Terrence spends 3 hours explaining the pattern of deaths, the symptoms, the common factors, the suspicious nurse, the medication discrepancies, all of it. The detective reviews the evidence. This is substantial. If you're right, we're dealing with a serial killer. I know. That's why I reported it. The detective looks at him. You know the nursing home is threatening to sue you for slander and HIPAA violations? Let them try. I'm a whistleblower reporting crimes. That's protected activity. Still going to make your life difficult. My life's been difficult for 4 years. I'm used to it. Over the next 2 weeks, the investigation expands. The medical examiner's office identifies 3 patients whose families agree to exhumation and autopsy. Mrs. Patterson, Mr. Rodriguez, Mrs. Kim, all buried within the past 3 months, recent enough that tissue analysis might still show evidence of poisoning. The exhumations are done quietly, but word spreads. Media picks up the story. Former forensic chemist reports serial killings at nursing home. The coverage is intense. Terrence becomes the center of the story. Former expert who changed careers, worked at the nursing home, identified a pattern of murders, got fired for reporting it. Public reaction is split. Some people praise him as a hero. Others call him paranoid and accuse him of trying to get revenge on the nursing home for firing him. Sunrise Hills issues a statement. These allegations are completely unfounded. The deaths in question were all elderly patients with serious health conditions. We stand behind the medical care provided. Mr. Williams was terminated for violating patient privacy and making false accusations, not for legitimate concerns. But the investigation continues, regardless of their denials. The toxicology results come back after 3 weeks. Terrence gets a call from Dr. Morrison. "Terrence, you were right. All 3. His stomach drops. "What did you find?" "Mrs. Patterson. Lethal levels of digoxin. Far beyond therapeutic range. Someone gave her a massive overdose." "Mr. Rodriguez?" "Potassium chloride injection. Caused cardiac arrest that looked natural. We only caught it because we specifically tested for it based on your suggestion." "And Mrs. Kim?" "Insulin overdose. She wasn't diabetic, but someone injected enough insulin to cause fatal hypoglycemic cardiac arrest." Terrence closes his eyes. He'd been right, but being right means 3 people were definitely murdered, and possibly more. "How many others?" he asks. "We're getting court orders to exhume 4 more bodies. But Terrence, based on your timeline and the methods used, we might be looking at 12 to 15 victims over 3 years. Jesus! You did the right thing reporting this. If you hadn't noticed the pattern, this would have continued. The police investigation shifts into high gear. This is now a serial murder case. Detectives interview every staff member. Cheryl Anderson, the nurse Terrence had identified as suspicious, becomes the primary suspect. Her financial records show problems: debt, gambling addiction, desperate need for money, and investigators discover something damning. She'd been named in the wills of 3 deceased patients. Mrs. Kim had left her $50,000. Mr. Rodriguez had left her his car. Mrs. Patterson had changed her will 2 weeks before her death to leave Cheryl $75,000. All 3 had died shortly after changing their wills in Cheryl's favor. The pattern was clear. Cheryl had been befriending vulnerable elderly patients, manipulating them into leaving her money or assets, then murdering them to inherit quickly. Detectives search her home, find the evidence they need: stolen medications, insulin vials, digoxin pills taken from the nursing home pharmacy, syringes, everything needed to poison patients. They also find documents showing 12 different patients had left her money or belongings in their wills. 7 of those patients were dead, 5 were still alive. Cheryl Anderson is arrested and charged with 7 counts of first-degree murder. More charges pending as additional bodies are exhumed and tested. The case becomes national news. Nurse accused of poisoning patients for inheritance money. The story is everywhere. True crime podcasts, news documentaries, congressional hearings on nursing home safety, and Terrence is recognized as the person who exposed it, the forensic expert who'd noticed what everyone else missed, the whistleblower who'd risked his career to report murders. Margaret Chen and Sunrise Hills are destroyed, sued by every family of every deceased patient, investigated by state regulators, facing criminal charges for obstruction. They'd ignored credible warnings and fired the person who reported crimes. The facility's license is suspended, Medicare funding revoked, insurance canceled. Within 3 months, Sunrise Hills closes permanently. Margaret Chen is charged with obstruction of justice and reckless endangerment for ignoring Terrence's warnings, faces up to 5 years in prison. And Terrence is vindicated. Again. But this time, he's not letting anyone push him out of the work he was meant to do. 6 months after exposing the murders, Terrence receives multiple job offers. The medical examiner's office wants him back. Full reinstatement as senior forensic chemist, $120,000 salary. "We were wrong to let you go. Please come back." The state police want him for their crime lab. chief toxicologist position, $130,000, lead investigations of suspicious deaths, and 3 private forensic consulting firms want to hire him. 150,000 plotters to consult on criminal cases, testify as expert witness, train investigators. Terrence sits in his apartment reviewing the offers. 6 months ago, he was a physical therapist making $68,000. Now he has his pick of prestigious forensic positions. But something's different this time. He's learned something from the nursing home experience. He calls Dr. Morrison. I appreciate the offer to return, but I think I'm going to do something different. What's that? I'm going to start my own forensic consulting practice, specialize in nursing home and hospital deaths. Because this case proves something. Medical facilities hide suspicious deaths all the time. Families don't know to ask for autopsies. Deaths get ruled natural when they're actually murders. Someone needs to investigate these cases independently. That's a niche market. Exactly. And I have the expertise to fill it. Plus, I have credibility now. I exposed a serial killer. That'll bring clients. You're right. But Terrence, don't you want the security of a regular job? The benefits? I had that security. And it disappeared the moment it became politically inconvenient. I'd rather work for myself, control my own cases, not have to worry about administrators or politicians telling me to drop investigations. Morrison is quiet. Then, I understand. And honestly, you'll probably make more money consulting than you ever did working for the ME's office. Just promise me you'll still take our cases when we need your expertise. Absolutely. But on my terms. As a consultant, not an employee. 1 year after being fired from Sunrise Hills, Terrence sits in his actual office. Not a nursing home therapy room. A real forensic consulting office with his name on the door and his credentials on the wall. Williams Forensic Consulting, specialized investigation of suspicious deaths in healthcare facilities. He has contracts with 6 medical examiner offices, 3 state health departments, and 12 law firms. Consults on suspicious death cases across the region. Makes $180,000 in his first 9 months. More than he'd ever made as a salaried forensic chemist. But more than the money, he's doing work that matters. Investigating cases that would otherwise be ignored. Giving families answers. Finding justice for victims who died in places that were supposed to protect them. The Cheryl Anderson trial concludes after 3 months. Terrence testifies for 2 days, explaining how he identified the pattern, what the toxicology results meant, how the poisonings were done. His testimony is devastating to the defense, clear, detailed, impossible to refute. The jury convicts on all 12 murder counts. They'd found evidence of 12 victims total, not just the initial 5. Cheryl Anderson is sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole. 12 consecutive life terms. The families of her victims file civil lawsuits against her, against Sunrise Hills, against Margaret Chen personally for ignoring warnings. The settlements total $40 million. Cheryl has nothing. They'll never collect from her. But Sunrise Hills insurance and Margaret Chen's assets get divided among the families. And Terrence is called to testify in every case. Each time he's paid $400 hour as an expert witness. Each time he demonstrates that he was right about everything from the beginning. Margaret Chen faces criminal trial for obstruction. Terrence testifies against her. Ms. Chen, I reported my concerns about suspicious deaths. What was your response? Margaret, sitting at the defense table, looks broken. I told you to stop, that you were being paranoid. Did I provide you with specific medical evidence? Yes. Did I explain my professional background in forensic toxicology? Yes. And you still fired me instead of investigating? I thought you were wrong. I thought protecting the facility's reputation was more important than... She can't finish the sentence. More important than investigating potential murders? I was afraid of lawsuits. Afraid of losing our license. Afraid of what an investigation would do to our business. Tears streamed down her face. I was wrong. I should have listened. People died because I didn't listen. The jury convicts her of obstruction of justice and criminally negligent homicide. She's sentenced to 3 years in prison. At her sentencing, she looks at Terrence in the courtroom. I'm sorry. You were right about everything. I let people die because I cared more about money than lives. Terrence doesn't respond, accepts her apology silently, but without forgiveness. 12 people died. Margaret's apology doesn't bring them back. 2 years after exposing the murders, Terrence is invited to speak at a national healthcare conference about patient safety. He stands at a podium addressing 800 healthcare administrators, nurses, doctors, and safety professionals. 2 years ago, he begins, I was working as a physical therapist at a nursing home. I noticed a pattern: 5 patients dying suddenly under suspicious circumstances. I reported my concerns to administration. I was fired, publicly, humiliated, threatened with lawsuits. The audience is silent, listening. But I wasn't just a physical therapist. I'm Dr. Terrence Williams, Ph.D. in toxicology, former forensic chemist with 12 years of experience analyzing suspicious deaths. I knew what I was seeing. I knew the symptoms indicated poisoning. I knew the pattern meant serial murder. He paused. The administration didn't care about my expertise. They cared about liability, about reputation, about protecting the facility's business interests. They'd rather fire the person who noticed the murders than investigate whether murders were actually happening. Terrence clicked to a slide showing Cheryl Anderson's mugshot. This nurse poisoned 12 elderly patients over 3 years, manipulated them into changing their wills, then murdered them to inherit money. She operated freely because the facility prioritized revenue over safety. Another slide. The list of 12 victims with their photos. These are the people who died. They trusted the facility to keep them safe. They died because that facility valued money over lives, and because administrators ignored credible warnings from someone with expertise. He looked at the audience of healthcare leaders. How many of you have employees working below their qualifications right now? The nursing aide who's actually a nurse whose license lapsed, the janitor who used to be an engineer, the dietary worker who has a biology degree, the physical therapist who's actually a forensic toxicologist? About a quarter of the hands went up. Those people have knowledge you're not using, expertise you're ignoring because you judge them by their job titles instead of their capabilities. When they notice something wrong, when they report concerns based on real expertise, do you listen? Or do you dismiss them because their current position doesn't match their background? Terrence clicked to a slide showing Margaret Chen being led to prison. This administrator chose to ignore warnings, chose to protect the business instead of investigating murders. She's now serving 3 years in prison for obstruction of justice. Her facility is permanently closed. Her career is destroyed, all because she wouldn't listen when someone with expertise tried to warn her. Here's what I want you to understand. Expertise is portable. It exists in a person's mind, not in their job title. I had the same forensic knowledge working as a physical therapist that I'd had working as a forensic chemist. The only difference was whether anyone valued that knowledge. Another slide. Statistics on underemployment. Research shows 35% of healthcare workers are underemployed, working jobs below their education level. That's thousands of highly trained people whose expertise you're wasting. Nurses working as aides, doctors working as nurses, PhDs working in entry-level positions, all because of licensing issues, career gaps, economic circumstances, discrimination, or bad luck. But their knowledge doesn't disappear. Their training doesn't vanish. Their ability to notice problems and identify solutions stays intact. You're just not using it. Terrence looked directly at the audience. So here's my challenge. Go back to your facilities and actually talk to your staff. Ask about their backgrounds. Ask about their training. Ask what they notice, what concerns them, what problems they see. You'll be amazed what you learn. Because expertise exists at every level of your organization. The question is whether you're smart enough to recognize it and humble enough to listen. He clicked to his final slide, a photo of him in his forensic consulting office. After I was fired for reporting murders, I started my own forensic consulting practice. In 2 years, I've investigated 43 suspicious deaths in healthcare facilities, found evidence of murder or negligent homicide in 19 of those cases. That's 19 cases where healthcare facilities had suspicious deaths and either didn't notice or didn't investigate. How many suspicious deaths are happening at your facilities right now that nobody's investigating? How many times has someone tried to report concerns and been dismissed? How many experts working in low-level positions have knowledge you're ignoring? I found 12 murder victims because I had expertise that didn't match my job title. How many victims could have been saved at your facilities if you actually listened to the people who work there? His final slide was simple text. Listen to expertise, regardless of job title. Lives depend on it. One last thing, Terrence said. When someone reports concerns about patient safety, whether it's a doctor or a janitor, take them seriously. Investigate. Because the person making the report might have expertise you don't recognize, and ignoring them might cost lives. The nursing home that fired me learned that lesson the hard way. 12 patients dead. Facility closed. Administrator in prison. Millions in settlements. All because they wouldn't listen when someone with expertise tried to warn them. Don't make the same mistake. Listen. Investigate. Value expertise wherever you find it. Because the next person who notices something wrong might be the one who saves lives at your facility. Thank you. The standing ovation lasted 4 minutes. After his speech, Terrence was surrounded by healthcare administrators wanting consultation services, asking how to identify suspicious death patterns, requesting training for their staff, wanting to hire him to review their facility's death records. By the end of the conference, he had consulting contracts with 23 new facilities. They were paying him $300 an hour to review death records and train staff on recognizing suspicious patterns. His business was exploding. The expertise that had been wasted when he was working as a physical therapist was now in high demand. One woman approached him with tears in her eyes. "Dr. Williams, my mother died at a nursing home 3 years ago. They said it was a heart attack, but she'd been perfectly healthy. After hearing your speech, I wonder, could she have been murdered?" Terrence handed her his card. "Get me her medical records. I'll review them. If there's evidence of foul play, I'll help you get justice. Thank you." Nobody else would even consider it. They all said I was being paranoid. I understand that. I was called paranoid too, right up until they exhumed the bodies and found poison. Trust your instincts. If something felt wrong, it might have been. 3 years after exposing the Sunrise Hills murders, Terrence received a call that brought everything full circle. The prosecutor from the judge's case, the one that had destroyed his forensic career 4 years earlier. "Dr. Williams, this is Assistant District Attorney Rebecca Torres. We worked together on the Judge Brennan poisoning case." Terrence remembered. The case where the defense experts had made him look incompetent. Where the guilty wife had walked free. Where his career had been derailed. "I remember. I'm calling because we're reopening the case. Judge Brennan's wife died 6 months ago. Drug overdose, officially ruled accidental. But her sister found documents, journal entries where the wife admitted to poisoning the judge, bragged about getting away with it, about discrediting you." Terrence felt something cold settle in his chest. She confessed to murder? Yes. In private journals she never thought would be found. She detailed how she poisoned her husband with digoxin, how she paid the defense experts to lie, how she manipulated the jury, everything. So I was right. My analysis was correct. Yes, you were absolutely right. The defense experts committed perjury. We're opening a criminal investigation into them. And Dr. Williams, I'm calling to apologize. We should have backed you more strongly. Should have fought harder against the defense's attacks. You were telling the truth and we didn't support you enough. You got pressure from the judge's friends. I understand how the system works. That's not an excuse. You were right and we let you get destroyed anyway. I'm sorry." After they hung up, Terrence sat in his office thinking about the trajectory of his life. Destroyed for being right about one poisoning case. Rebuilt his career. Exposed a serial killer. Started a successful consulting business. And now vindication for the case that had started it all. The judge's widow had admitted she'd murdered her husband. The defense experts who'd lied were being investigated. Terrence's original analysis was being vindicated. It didn't undo the 4 years of struggle, didn't erase the career destruction and financial devastation, didn't compensate for being forced to become a physical therapist just to survive. But it proved he'd been right all along, that his expertise was real, that the system had failed him, not the other way around. 5 years after being fired from Sunrise Hills, Terrence stood in a federal building accepting an award from the Department of Health and Human Services. The Healthcare Safety Excellence Award goes to Dr. Terrence Williams for his exceptional work identifying and exposing criminal activity in healthcare facilities. Dr. Williams' consulting has led to 63 successful criminal prosecutions, the closure of 12 dangerous facilities, and countless lives saved through improved safety protocols. Applause filled the room. Healthcare officials, patient advocates, law enforcement, people who understood the significance of his work. The HHS secretary continued. Dr. Williams exemplifies how expertise persists regardless of circumstances. When he worked as a physical therapist and identified a serial killer operating in a nursing home, he demonstrated that knowledge doesn't require the right job title, just the training to recognize what others miss and the courage to act. Terrence stepped to the podium, looked at the audience of healthcare leaders and safety advocates. Thank you. This award represents something important. Recognition that expertise exists everywhere, often in unexpected places. When I was working as a physical therapist 5 years ago, I had the same forensic knowledge I'd developed over 12 years as a forensic chemist. The only difference was whether anyone valued that knowledge. He paused. I'm standing here today, not because I suddenly got smarter or learned new skills, but because I refused to let circumstances define my capabilities. When I saw people being murdered, I used my expertise to stop it, even though my job title was physical therapist instead of forensic investigator. There are thousands of people working in healthcare right now whose expertise doesn't match their job titles. Former doctors working as nurses, former nurses working as aides, PhDs working in entry-level positions, all because of licensing barriers, economic circumstances, career gaps, or discrimination. But their knowledge is still valuable. Their ability to notice problems doesn't disappear just because they're working below their qualifications. The question is whether we're smart enough to recognize that expertise and humble enough to listen when they speak. Terrence looked at the healthcare leaders in the audience. In the 5 years since I exposed the Sunrise Hills murders, I've investigated 127 suspicious deaths in healthcare facilities, found evidence of criminal activity in 47 cases. That's 47 cases where someone was harming patients and nobody with authority was investigating. But you know who often notices these things first? The people working closest to patients? The aides who spend hours with residents? The housekeepers who see what happens in rooms? The dietary workers who notice eating patterns? The maintenance workers who observe behaviors? The physical therapists who track patient progress? They see things that doctors and administrators miss. They have information that's valuable if anyone bothers to listen. But too often, they're dismissed because their job titles don't command respect. His final slide showed a simple message. Listen to everyone. Expertise exists at every level. I'll leave you with this. When someone at your facility reports a concern, no matter what their job title is, take it seriously. Investigate, because that person might have expertise you don't recognize. They might be seeing something that everyone else is missing, and ignoring them might cost lives. The nursing home that fired me ignored 12 murders because they wouldn't listen to a physical therapist who noticed patterns. Don't make the same mistake. Value expertise wherever you find it. Listen to your staff. Investigate concerns thoroughly, because the next person who reports something suspicious might be the one who saves lives at your facility. Thank you for recognizing that expertise doesn't require the right credentials or the right job title. It just requires knowledge and the courage to use it. The standing ovation lasted 6 minutes. After the ceremony, Terrence stood with his award, crystal recognition of his contributions to healthcare safety. 5 years ago, he'd been a physical therapist making $68,000 and being told to stay in his lane. 3 years ago, he'd started his forensic consulting practice. Now he was being honored by the federal government as a leader in healthcare safety. His consulting firm now employed 12 people, former forensic scientists who'd left the field, medical examiners who'd been pushed out, toxicologists who couldn't find traditional work. Terrence had built a company that valued expertise regardless of current circumstances. Annual revenue, $4.2 million, everyone making six figures, all of them investigating suspicious deaths and making healthcare facilities safer. Terrence had proven that expertise persists through career changes. That knowledge holds value even when circumstances force you into different work. That skills don't disappear, they just wait for the right moment to be recognized. And hundreds of lives were saved because he'd refused to let being a physical therapist stop him from using his forensic training when it mattered. Have you ever worked a job far below your qualifications? Have you ever had your expertise dismissed because of your current position? Have you ever noticed something wrong but been told to stay in your lane? Share your story in the comments below. Subscribe to our channel for more stories of hidden expertise, dismissed warnings, and the moments when people working beneath their qualifications prove they're exactly the experts the situation needed. Because somewhere right now, a brilliant person is working a survival job, a PhD is stocking shelves, a former specialist is doing entry-level work, a highly trained professional is working far below their capabilities because circumstances pushed them there. Don't judge them by their current job title. You don't know their story. You don't know what they survived to get here. You don't know what they're capable of. The physical therapist might be a forensic toxicologist. The nursing aide might be a registered nurse. The janitor might be an engineer. The person you're dismissing might be the expert who notices what everyone else missed. Terrence proved that expertise doesn't vanish when you change careers. It just waits for the moment when circumstances align with knowledge, when observation meets opportunity, when someone finally listens. And when that moment comes, the person everyone underestimated might be the one who exposes murders, saves lives, and changes an entire industry's approach to safety.